Today, we're going to unpack a diplomatic firestorm that's been brewing at the United Nations. But this story is about so much more than just today's headlines. We're going to go deep into the really complex history that connects Cairo, Somalia, and the unrecognized nation of Somaliland.
It really all boils down to this one question. How can one nation simply recognizing another, in this case Somaliland, end up triggering a full-blown crisis at the UN Security Council? Well, as we're about to see, the answer is anything but simple.
You see, this is a story of two different timelines just crashing into each other. When Israel recognized Somaliland, it basically forced the world to finally confront a violent, completely unresolved history from the 1980s that is still shaping the Horn of Africa today. Okay, so let's start with the immediate crisis. Israel's decision to formally recognize Somaliland kicked off an emergency meeting at the UN Security Council. And that's where two totally different arguments went head-to-head. And right here, you can see the fundamental clash of stories. On one side, you had Egypt, framing the whole thing as a straightforward violation of Somalia's sovereignty. But on the other side, Israel brought up a much darker history: the mass violence committed against the Isaaq people by the former Somali regime. Now, to really understand where Somaliland is coming from, we have to rewind the clock. We need to talk about the brutal events that Somaliland considers the very foundation of its existence. The crucial event here is the Isaaq campaign. Now, this wasn't just some random conflict. It was a state-directed, systematic military operation targeting the Isaaq people. This historical trauma is absolutely central to Somaliland's identity. And this really highlights why this history is so critical. For Somaliland, its claim to be a country isn't just about old colonial borders. Now, it's grounded in a story of survival, the argument that they were targeted for destruction by the very state they were supposed to be a part of. And get this isn't some new information that just came out. The international community, or at least parts of it, knew what was going on. Israel itself was raising the alarm at the UN about these atrocities way back in 1990. Even before the Somali state completely fell apart. This timeline really shows how things just spiraled out of control. In the late 80s, the Barre regime was literally bombarding major cities like Hargeisa, which led to mass killings and people being forced from their homes. So when the regime finally imploded in 1991, Somaliland's declaration of independence wasn't some sudden move, it was the direct result of all this intense violence. Now, this brings us to the other major player in this whole thing, Egypt. So why is Cairo so invested in keeping Somalia's borders exactly as they are? Well, to understand their position today, we've got to look at their actions yesterday. For decades, Egypt's foreign policy wasn't really about Somalia for Somalia's sake. It was all about geopolitics. Cairo saw Somalia as a strategic pawn, a piece on the chessboard to use against rivals like Ethiopia during the Cold War. The actual fate of the country itself was kind of secondary to its strategic value. And that strategic thinking led to some very real support. This wasn't passive. Egypt provided weapons and consistent diplomatic backing that helped keep the Siad Barre regime in power, basically extending its lifespan even as it was committing the very atrocities we just talked about. This support wasn't a footnote. It was a crucial reason that regime lasted as long as it did. The link between Egypt's past and the international response later on becomes crystal clear when you look at one person in particular, Boutros Ghali. Because before he became the UN Secretary General, he was a key architect of Egypt's foreign policy, including his relationship with Barre's Somalia. So, imagine this. The UN intervenes in Somalia after it collapses, and the man in charge is seen by many, especially in the north, not as a neutral party, but as someone connected to the very policies that propped up their oppressor. This completely undermined trust from the get-go, and it meant that accountability for past crimes was never really on the table. Alright, so since that collapse in 1991, Somaliland and the rest of Somalia have gone down two dramatically different roads. And this divergence is right at the heart of Somaliland's argument today. The contrast over the last 3 decades is just stark. You have Somaliland, largely on its own, building a functioning state. Just think about that. Relative peace, a political system that actually works, multiple competitive elections, all built from the ground up with very little outside help. Meanwhile, Somalia, despite massive international support, has struggled with constant instability and fractured leadership for that entire same period. And this really is the core of Somaliland's frustration. From their perspective, it feels like the international community just ignores both their past suffering and their very real present-day achievements in building a state.
So what does this all add up to? Well, we're left with this unresolved legacy, where the failures of the past are directly fueling the conflicts of today. And here is the great irony in all of this. The very same Egyptian foreign policy that once helped keep the regime in power, that shattered the Somali state, now insists on rigidly preserving the map that was left behind by that collapse.
So the key unresolved issues are pretty clear. First, the violence of the Isaaq campaign has never been meaningfully dealt with on the world stage. Second, the stability and democratic progress Somaliland has painstakingly built for 30 years is still not officially recognized. And finally, the consequences of these old policy decisions aren't just history, they are actively shaping the Horn of Africa right now.
Which leaves us with a final and pretty difficult question. This whole debate at the UN isn't just about maps or sovereignty. It's really about whether it's possible to build a stable future for the region while ignoring the deep grievances of the past. How can a future be built on an unresolved past?